Hello, it's Helen from Journal with Purpose, and in today's video I'm going to be showing you how you can use Tombow ABT brush pens to create a watercolour effect. I'm going to be using this floral watercolour set, but you can use any of the normal Tombow ABT brush pens. I'm also going to be using a plastic cello bag, but any plastic packaging will do. So you'll need some brush pens and also either a water brush or a paintbrush that you can dip into some water. I'm going to start by doing some brush lettering, and if this is something that you want to try more, then I have a free brush lettering worksheet which is available on the printables section on my blog once you subscribe. And I'll leave a link to that in the description box down below. This lovely brush pen set was sent to me by Colt Pens, and they do a few different collections if you're looking at doing something in florals or perhaps green leaves. So it's worth looking at if you want to try and build some sets up for particular themes. But say otherwise, any of your normal Tombow ABT brush pens will work fine. They're just absolutely the same pens that you'll get in this set. The Tombow ABT brush pens are water-based, so once we get to the watercolour section of this video, if you haven't got the Tombow ABTs but you've got other water-based pens, it's definitely worth giving it a go. But I thought I'd start this video with a brush lettered quote, as that's what most people associate these pens with. But I think it's really nice when you find that you can do other things with your supplies and create different types of projects that perhaps you hadn't had a go at before. So I'm just alternating the colours so that I've got a bit of variety on this lettered quote. If you're on Skillshare and you're wanting to do a little more brush lettering, I do have a class over there showing you how to do a few different techniques and working through the alphabet. Or if you're interested in trying out Skillshare, you can try it out free of charge for 2 months by using the link down below. I'm now using a black pen just to draw some outlines around some of the letters. So I'm going along the bottom of them and on the right hand side. I thought it would be fun on the word bloom to just doodle in some quick flowers, because that will tie in really nicely with the quote and the flower that I'm going to create with the watercolour effect. And it's a really nice thing, I think, with brush lettering where you get those lovely thick down strokes that you can add some extra decoration if you want to. For my watercolour flower, I'm going to be using one of the images in my book for reference, and it's on page 36 if you have a copy of it and you want to follow along. So you want to make sure that you're using a black pen that is waterproof, and I'm using a Staedtler Pigment Liner. And I know that these ones work really well and never smudge regardless of how much water you put over the top. In this video, I'm using a Rhodia Gold book, which is the same book I always use when I'm creating my bullet journal. And it's one of the reasons I really like using these brush pens for the watercolour effect, is it's only normal journal paper, but because you don't need to add loads of water, you don't get the crinkling that you get if you're perhaps using regular watercolour sort of paint sets actually onto your journal pages. So I'm now just adding some thin lines to add a bit of extra detail and depth to my flower. I'm finishing off the sketch by adding a stem and a leaf. I would love to know if you've tried using your brush pens to create watercolours in your journal, and if so, how you got along with it. I've certainly found that the Rhodia paper works really well. It's got a kind of brushed vellum coating over the top, and that helps the ink to sit really nicely. So I'm now going to start adding the watercolour effect. So I'm scribbling using the pen onto that clear cello bag, and I'm then going to squeeze a little bit of water so that it comes down the brush, and I'm just going to pick that up and paint with it like you would normally right into the centre of that flower. And depending on how much water you add, you'll either get a lighter or darker effect. And I'm then going to turn the bag over and just put some of that ink around the outside to create some watercolour splotch effects. And I'll wipe down the bag and then just quickly clean the brush. And because they're water-based, you'll see that the ink comes out really nicely. I'm now moving on to the light pink colour, which I'm going to use for the petals. And again, I'm just going to drop a little bit of water onto that ink and then dilute it and move it around. And for the centre of the flower, I'm going to use some of the ink where I haven't added lots of water. And as I move to the outside, I'm going to use the more diluted ink. It enables you to get a couple of different shades, again in the same way that you would if you were using a watercolour set, where you can just get those lovely different shades depending on how much ink you're using. And they then blend really nicely together from the dark right outside to the lighter edge of the petal. And you don't need to use lots of ink from your pen for this. Once you add the water, it goes a really long way. I'm just going to keep repeating that process until I've finished adding colour all the way around the petals on that flower. Another one of the bonuses from using this technique is that if you were journaling on the go and you didn't want to take a whole load of supplies with you, like a watercolour set, you could just take a couple of brush pens and a water brush along with a little plastic packaging and you'd be good to go. They're also really handy if you're creating somewhere where you're worried about making too much mess. I'm now going to add a little more of that pink ink onto my bag, and this time I'm going to use a water spritzer because I want to make sure that that ink is really diluted to create some more ink splotches. If you don't have a spritzer, you could drop some more water from your water brush, or with a regular paintbrush straight onto the plastic bag, or you could just drip some water onto it. Now that's done, again I've cleaned the brush and the bag, and I'm going to move on to using that darker pink colour. I thought it would be nice just to add some of that pink to the very tips of the petal. And I'm adding quite a lot of water as it's a dark colour, and you'll see that it really softens that colour down when you compare to how it looked when I used it on the brush lettered quote. I find it a really fun and relaxing way to create, and it's always nice to try out some different techniques in your journal. And this would of course work really well on watercolour paper too. But as I mentioned earlier, I'm really happy with how little crinkling it actually adds to your journal pages. So I'm now spritzing that ink again, and I'm going to just tap the bag lightly onto the page. And if you get a big blob like I just did there, you can just pat the bag down again, pick the ink up and move it around your page. And the more water and the more ink you've got, the more concentrated effect you're going to have with those splotches. The final thing I'm going to do is use the green colour to add some of that ink to the stem and the leaf. So again, I'm just scribbling with it really lightly onto the plastic sheet and adding the water to mix it all together. I'm starting off quite light down the bottom. And as I get towards the top of that stem, I'm going to use some of the less diluted ink to create a shadow under where that flower head is. And you can add a couple of layers if you want to keep building up the different colours and the depth. Another thing you can try doing is using a couple of different coloured inks on your bag and then using the water to mix them together. And again, then you can create a whole different colour palette just by using your brush pens. I'm now going to do exactly the same with that green ink, and I didn't need to add any more water this time, just to add a couple of splotches on my page. And you can see now, even when this page is still really wet, I'm going to carefully turn it over so it doesn't run. But nothing has come through onto the other side at all, and there's really not much crinkling even while it's still wet. I really hope you've enjoyed watching this video and that you feel inspired to have a go with your own brush pens and see which different effects you can create in your journal. Thank you ever so much for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you really soon in the next one.